Lightning never strikes twice. But how about 1,000,000 times on your face?
Stand up! Vanguard!
Hey Cardfighters, welcome to the second set review of Aerial Steed Liberation. And today we're gonna talk about, you might guessed it, Narukami, Thunder Dragons. And oh boy, did they got giga charged with this set, cause their new VR, Gauntlet Buster Dragon, is insane. But not only that card is insane, they got a lot of very interesting new cards to the edition for standard, and even to my surprise, they even got something for premium. So, without further ado, there's a lot to talk about, as unlike Gold Paladin, they did got more than 5 cards. So let's jump right into this set review, as we've got many cards to talk about. We're gonna start it off with, of course, the new triggers they got, but they also got some reprints, and unfortunately, I'm only gonna give them 1 star, as reprints are reprints, and we already got a trial deck where they got them, so yeah. Now onto the new triggers that we got. They got a new front trigger in the form of Exorcist Mage Lin, but also a third crit trigger in the form of Spark Edge Drago Kid. And I'm gonna give them both 3 stars, as once again, just like all the other ones, it gives more playability, more options, and just more trigger goodness. They also got a new starter in the likes of Variant Drago Kit, but it's basically just a generic starter with the same skill, but a palette swap of some sort. And I'm gonna give it 1 star, as yeah, not a fan of these palette swap starters. Narukami also got a new grade 1 vanilla card that is Dragon Monk Egan, and this time for them they got the 9k 0 shield vanilla. And honestly, I'm not really a fan of these type of vanillas, especially for Narukami, as they got better ride targets for the grade 1, so you're not benefiting off the 9k body. And also, if you ride this thing, you might screw up your plays, as your opponent has an incentive to call booster behind their Vanguard to hit you if you went first. And that's not what you want, as when you go into the Sonic Drill, you cannot get a free plus. So actually, you don't want to give your opponent the incentive to call that booster there. So yeah, I'm gonna give it 2 stars, as there are some synergies with it, and it can be a good attacker and that kind of stuff. So it's not a complete waste of a card. Now, what is, in my opinion, a little bit of a waste of a card, that's this vanilla grade 2 that is Dragon Dancer Noemi. And she is the 3k 2 crit vanilla type. Only Narukami cannot really use this or benefit from it in general sense, as they have no way to maybe give it a lot of power or restand it a lot or that kind of stuff that we've seen with Nova Grappler. And yeah, the grade 2 spots is very important, as that's where all your utility cards and bind cards and all that kinds of goodness lies. Maybe in premium this is more useful, as you can give it a lot more power more easily, but even then, I don't know. So I'm only gonna give it 1 star, as I just cannot see any fit right now for the card, and it probably wouldn't be played at this point. Maybe in the future, but not now. They also got the new grade 1 perfect guard that is the drop draw PG. So just like all the other ones, I can give it 3 stars, as it opens up more playability and more deck building, especially with the addition of the new triggers. Now on to the cards with actual skills. We start off with this grade 1 that is 100 Thunder Djinn. And its skill is continuous regular circle. During your turn, if the number of cards in your opponent's damage zone is 4 or more, this unit gets power plus 10k. So it's basically limit break on a reverse, because now your opponent needs to be at 4 damage. Interesting take on the skill, to be very honest. But besides that, it isn't really that amazing, as you are depending on what your opponent is doing, because they can deny you this skill if they're gonna guard a lot, and the 7k body also doesn't really help. Sure, if it gets a 10k power, then it's pretty amazing, as it can be a 70k attacker or 70k booster, and then it becomes very interesting. But the problem is, just like most Axel decks, getting them to 4 damage might be a little bit tough, especially with the new VR that just outright kills them. So I'm only gonna give it 2 stars for now, but I can say that there is potential for this card. It can be a very good unit if the deck allows it to do its thing and be able to get that extra 10k body more consistent. Now next up, we've got a very unique grade 2 that is Desert Gunner Doran, and it's an 8k grade 2 with the skill Auto Rigor Circle. When a card is discarded from hand for the cost of your Vanguard's ability, if this unit is in the front row, cast Soul Blast 2 and draw a card. So basically, when you use this Sonic Drill Dragon skill, you can use this one and then draw a card. That's not bad, to be honest, but not great either, as the Soul Blast 2 is pretty heavy for the Dystonics drill build, as you're already gonna use Soul for other cards, like Dragonic Deathside, for example. But if we're gonna look at the new VR that's also gonna discard, that build might not use Soul all as much, so it might be useful in that case. But then again, the 8k body doesn't make it really great and needs to be on the rearguard circle itself, so I'm very hesitant. It does have some premium applicabilities with the discard, as Narukami Premium also discards, so it might have his way right there, but I'm only gonna give it 2 stars. It just, it looks more unique awkward than unique that's interesting. Then we're gonna continue with the unique cards, as we've got this other grade 2 that is Dragon Knight Zubail, and its skills is auto rearguard circle. When placed, bind one of your rearguards. Alright, so in premium sense, this looks like a support for Dungaree. Never thought we ever get Dungaree support. But in standards case, you basically want to call this one as your first unit to the rearguard circle. So usually with Narukami, you're not going to call anything unless your opponent's going to call something. So in that case, you just call this one. But why does it bind something? Is it really that strong in that case? Well, that's because of the second ability that continues a rearguard circle. During your turn, this unit gets power plus 10k. So it's a 19k beater. And on an Excel marker, potentially 24 or 29. Yeah, that's strong. And with some other cards that we have in this set, we can make it even stronger. So it's actually a pretty decent card in that sense. Only the downside is mid to late game, you're not going to use this card all that often, as you lose a rearguard out of it. So you usually want to call this in the early game, maybe when you just ridden your first grade 3, so you can put it onto the Excel marker, for example. But maybe it will get some use out of it against other control decks that they wipe your board. Well, then you can call it, no problems, no worries. So yeah, there are some synergies with that. So I'm gonna give it 3 stars, as it does have some synergies and it's useful at the current build, how Narukami is played and also played against, as you usually don't want to call early game other rearguards. So this might be a good fit for that. Then next we've got a new grade 3 that's without a marker, that is Brat, Arrow, Dragon. And this one is very interesting, as it got 2 skills, and it is continuous on rearguard circle during your turn. If it's on an additional rearguard circle, so an Excel circle, this unit gets power plus 5k. So a 70k attacker, but with the extra circle power in mind, that's 22 or 27. But then we get the second ability, and that's continuous on rearguard circle. During the battle it attacked, your opponent's auto abilities cannot activate. Yeah. So this thing blocks Sentinels, but not only Sentinels, it blocks all kinds of defensive skills. Maybe something like Dark Soul Conductor, doesn't work. Even Dentarian, doesn't work. The new Silver Torn card that I talked about a couple of days ago, doesn't work. And in Premium, G-Guards, well, bye-bye to your G-Guards because they don't work. Yeah, this is pretty insane in that sense. The only downside is it isn't really that strong. It needs to be on a additional rearguard circle to give it some power. Sure, in Premium you can give it power other ways, but in Premium this thing has its own issues, as the current build is very Vanquisher focused. So if you run this card, that means you're not gonna get additional circles, so you don't get the extra power through its own skill. But overall, I'm gonna give it 3 stars, as it does have some very interesting abilities, and the way that you can use the card can be very deadly. So somebody might just run it as a one-off just to screw with your opponent if they only have perfect guards, and you just smack this thing onto the field and they're like, oh, crap. Now, another card that is very interesting and that has some synergies with everything that Narukami can offer, that's this grade 1, that is Desert Gunner Gaiban. And its ability is auto rearguard circle. At the end of the battle that your Vanguard attacked, choose one of your units. Until the end of turn, it gets power plus 3k, and your opponent cannot call Sentinels from his or her hand for the battles that the chosen unit attacked. So this basically gives a unit the Sentinel restriction, even though they didn't have it. You're probably not going to give it to the previous unit, Brat, Arrow, Dragon, as it already enables your opponent to use Sentinels. But this thing can give another very good strong beater, and we have a couple of those in this deck, the Sentinel restriction. So that can be very deadly, but you can also use some synergies with Destonic Drill, as it states at the end of the battle that your Vanguard attacks. So when Destonic Drill attack for the first time, you can resolve this ability and give it to your Vanguard. So the second time Destonic Drill attacks, you cannot PG it. But also after the second attack, you can use this unit again and give another unit plus 3k and the Sentinel restriction. And we also have another card that we're going to talk about very soon, that is Fiendish Sword Cho-Ou, if I remember the name correctly, that can restand on its own when the Vanguard attacked. So you can give him the Sentinel restriction plus the 3k, that can also turn him into a magic number, and then twice for those attacks, they cannot perfect guard, as you can attack with your Vanguard, give that unit the Sentinel restriction, then attack with it, then attack with your Destonic Drill again, then restand it, and then attack again. So you can give those two attacks a Sentinel restriction, and while at the same time give another unit one more time a Sentinel restriction. So there are some insane synergies that you can do with this card. And the plus 3k power that you're giving for free, because don't mind you, this skill is free. And it has no restriction or whatsoever. It's just when your Vanguard attack. So I'm going to give it definitely 4 stars, as the only downside to this card is that it's after your Vanguard attack, not while your Vanguard attacks. So you could give it to your Vanguard before they're going to guard. So sadly that doesn't work, and it doesn't really have something interesting with premium as well, because multi-tacking in premium for the Vanguard is almost non-existent in most builds. But the fact that it's free, and a plus 3k, and this Sentinel restriction makes it a very solid card. The only downside is it's at the end of the battle, and it's on the 7k body. But other than that, a pretty good card. But from highs, we go to low, as we also got this great one that is Bold Capture Dragon, and its skill is auto rearguard circle when placed. Your opponent choose one of his or her rear guards in the back row and moves to an open rearguard circle in his or her front row. Yeah, this is basically, in my opinion, a 1-star card, as it is a free skill, but a skill that so many other cards already do, but they can do it better. And this also gives your opponent to choose, but in most cases they cannot choose anyway, as there are only 2 columns that they can interact with this skill, and probably one column is either empty or completely full. There are 10 times better options than this all around in Narukami. Another very interesting grade 1, but in my opinion not that strong, is Ceremonial Bonfire Eradicator Castor. And its skill is auto rearguard circle when placed, cost, discard a card from your hand, choose a rearguard in your opponent's front row, bind it, and this unit gets power plus 5k until the end of turn. So for a discard, you bind one of your opponent's units, and this one becomes a 13k attacker. The 30k attacker is nice, but not amazing. And the fact that you need a discard makes this, in my opinion, not a good card, as your hand size is a limited resources in an Excel deck, and especially in Narukami, where your units are very important for your hand size. So I'm not very fond of this, and this also doesn't interact with the Desert Gunner that can Soul Blast 2 and discard, as it only works for your Vanguard skills at discard, and this is a rearguard skill. So I don't think this is going to be played in most decks, as it's just too heavy for the discard in general. So I'm only going to give it 2 stars, as it has value, but that's everything said with the card. Then we get to a new grade 3 with an Excel marker, that is Land Shocker Dragon, and its skills act on Vanguard Circle, cost, counter plus 1, soul plus 1, choose a rearguard in your opponent's front row, bind it, and if you bound, 2 of your units in the same column as that unit gets power plus 5k until the end of turn. Well, this is a pretty okay skill. For Counter Blast, Soul Blast, you bind 1 unit, so that's very generic. And you can give 2 units potentially 5k power. And it's an act ability, so you can set everything up, unlike something like an on-place Vanguard skill. So it's an overall okay skill, but not amazing, so I'm going to give it 2 stars, as it's a Vanguard skill, and Narukami has way better Vanguards to use, so that basically hinged this card lower. If it was a Vanguard and rearguard skill, then this could have been a pretty good unit, but because it's only solely behind a Vanguard skill, sadly 2 stars. Then we get to a new grade 2 that was, honestly, to my surprising, amazing card for premium, as that's Turning Bash Dragon. And its skills auto rearguard circle when it attacks. If your opponent's Vanguard is a grade 3 or greater, cost, Soul Blast 1, choose one of your opponent's rearguards in the front row and bind it. So basically an unattacked bind for a Soul Blast 1. That's a pretty good cost for a bind. But what's more important is that it's a mid-battle bind. That's the same thing that we have with Dystonic Drill that could do this mid-battle with the restand and all the kinds of stuff. But now we can do it with the rearguard, so we have more options with multi-attacking shenanigans with your phoenixes. So you can attack with your rearguards, then you attack with this one, recall your phoenixes, and then attack twice or attack once with your Vanguard and give every front trigger, crit trigger onto those phoenix. That's an important change to that combo play. This enables that. But what makes this card pretty damn sick and amazing is its premium applications. As the problem of premium Narukami is that all their stuff, all their good stuff, do not bind, they retire bind. And that means all these cards that interact with when stuff are bound don't work. And the most important and strongest card of Narukami, Rising Phoenix, was a dead card in premium. This card makes those cards work in premium, and that's amazing, and that's gonna change a lot. It's not gonna turn them into tier 1 or something, but they're gonna help make them more playable in premium, and that's why, in my opinion, this is definitely a 4-star card, as it makes a pretty dead or useless clan in a format into a playable clan, or at least it can do something in that format than just outright die. And also in standard, this makes a lot more plays happening. The only downside to this card is that it's a 9k body that doesn't gain any power whatsoever. But we have other ways to give it power, so we can work around that, so it's not really that bad. Now we go to a combo card of 2 cards that is very interesting, that makes their own gimmick. And we're going to start off with this grade 1, Dragon Dancer RaiRain, or RaiRain. And her skills, Auto and Vanguard to Rearguard Circle. When its attack or the attack it boosted hits the Vanguard, look at the 7 cards from the top of your deck, reveal up to 1 Thundering Break Dragon from among them and put it into your hand, and shuffle your deck. If you put a card into your hand and this unit is on the Rearguard Circle, put this unit into your soul. So basically you can +1 out of it if it's your Vanguard and you attack with it on the first turn and it hits. Luckily it's an 8k body, so you can do that without boosting. But if it's on the Rearguard Circle, you can potentially trade this thing in for the grade 3. And this will help with your right consistency. But also because the grade 3 has an axial marker, you can generate more axial markers on a more consistent basis. And that's something that you want. Also, the fact that it goes to the soul instead of just outright retiring makes it pretty good, as it synergizes just with the grade 2 that I just talked about that can potentially bind stuff for a Soul Blast. But you're probably not going to use that card. As we're going to see with the grade 3, you don't need to. But in general sense, I'm gonna give this card just 3 stars, as it is a good synergy card with the grade 3 and it is a consistency booster for that grade 3. But the fact that it only works with that grade 3 makes it a little bit limited in any other type of deck for Narukami. And because the grade 3 works in a kind of way that makes it a little bit redundant because of the VR, doesn't make this card very good. But it's a good alternate option for different decks, or just an outright budget option. So that's why 3 stars, it's not bad. Now to the grade 3 that this card can search, that's Thundering Break Dragon, and its skill is Continuous Vanguard Circle. If your opponent's Vanguard is a grade 3 or greater, when this unit would attack, it battles all of the units in your opponent's front row. Yeah, that's basically what I meant, that maybe the grade 2 you don't gonna use it, as yeah, you're gonna attack them anyway. So this is a front row field wipe attacker, just like Vermilion. Only this one doesn't cost shit. Yeah, that's pretty nuts, if you ask me. That's already pretty insane. But then we get to the second ability, and that's Act on Vanguard and Rearguard Circle. Once per turn, cost, count them as 1, and your opponent moves each of the rearguards in his or her back row to an open rearguard circle in the front row. They even move diagonally. And I love that word. I probably cannot pronounce it, but it means I can finally kill those fuckers behind the Vanguard. As usually those were the only save units for Narukami, but with this thing, no more. They're dead. And that makes this card pretty damn sick, as you can just move everything to the front row and then with this other ability and wipe them all out of the face of the planet Earth. And that makes this thing pretty sick. And just for a counterblast, yeah, pretty good. It's, in my opinion, this is definitely a 5-star card, but it is hindered by the fact that the VR is so good. Because this thing was revealed first, and then everybody went crazy because this thing with the Sonic Drill, yeah, you had some amazing things that you could set this thing up before the Sonic Drill, remove that booster behind the Vanguard, and then get a free restand potentially. So this thing is a 5-star card, but it looks pale in comparison to the card I'm gonna talk about in a minute. So let's get going and see what I mean with that. First off, we're gonna talk about the grade 2s that are gonna support the new VR, and we'll kick it off with this grade 2 that is Fiendish Sword Eradicator Cho-Ou. And its skills are auto and Vanguard and rearguard circle. When placed, cost counter +1, choose a column, bind a rearguard in your opponent's front row of that column, and move up to 1 rearguard in the back row to the rearguard circle in the front row. So it kills one and then pulls the back row to the front row. That's pretty neat, as you do 2 things in one skill for only 1 counterblast. Most units cannot do that for that low cost of 1 counterblast. So overall, that's a pretty good thing. But at the same time, it does hinder your synergy because you're not emptying a front row. But with stuff like Gauntlet Buster Dragon and with Eradicator Sword Dragon we just talked about, that might not be a problem. But then we get to the second ability, and this is the thing that I already discussed when we talked about the Desert Gunner grade 1 that can give unit a Sentinel restriction, as its second ability is Auto Rearguard Circle. Once per turn, at the end of the battle that your Vanguard attacked, if there are no rearguards in your opponent's front row, cost counter +1 and stand this unit. So we can have a restander on the rearguard circle on its own devices. That's pretty insane. And with the guard restriction from the grade 1 Desert Gunner, you can do all kinds of crazy shenanigan plays, as you can turn this thing into a 22k restander on an extra 1, of course, with the guard restriction that they cannot PG it. But you can also give it maybe more power with triggers and all that kind of stuff, as you're attacking with the Vanguard at least once. And then you attack with this thing, and then you attack with the Vanguard once again, and you can attack with this thing once again. So you can give it power with all those shenanigans on top of it. So yeah, a very scary unit in my opinion, and definitely a 5-star card, as it opens up so many plays, and it does it for 1 counterless. But now we get to the final 2 cards, and the cards that basically make the new deck. And we're going to start off with the grade 2, that is Supreme Army Eradicator Djinn, and its skills are Auto Rearguard Circle. When your opponent's rearguard is bound during your turn, this unit and all Eradicator Gauntlet Buster Dragon on your Vanguard circle or rearguard circle gets power +5k until the end of turn. So let's say you bind 4 units, and this might sound crazy, but you're gonna see that it's not. This thing gets +20k and your Vanguard gets +20k, and maybe rearguard's version of your Vanguard also get +20k. But if you have another copy of this one, all those Gauntlet Buster Dragons don't get +20k, they get +40k. So this thing stacks, and it's insane with all the free power you're getting. And don't forget, we have that unit that can give Sentinel restriction to these grade 2s that gain all this power, or your rearguard Gauntlet Buster Dragons that gain all this power. So don't forget that. But then we get the second ability, and it's on a rearguard circle. At the end of the battle that it attacked a Vanguard, if there are no rearguards in your opponent's front row, put this unit into your soul and draw a card. Let me explain the no units in the front row of your opponent's field, just like this one as the previous grade 2, isn't going to be an issue with Gauntlet Buster Dragon, as it just eradicates. I mean, its name, it's in the name. But also with the other grade 3 that we just talked about, that can just attack everything, that's also synergized with this. This second ability is similar to the Aqua Force grade 2 that goes into the soul, and with the power this unit can get, the +15k is not really that hard. It's basically a carbon copy of that version. Only difference is you need to bounce something instead of resting something, but it also gives the power away to another unit that is your Vanguard. So this is, in my opinion, an even better version than Coral Assault. And Coral Assault is a pretty good card. So yeah, 5 stars. No questions asked. But now we get to the main card, the big boss monster, the one that's basically zapping your opponent for face every single time. And you're doing it with a smile on your face while your opponent is crying in agony. And that is, of course, Eradicator Gauntlet Buster Dragon. And its skills are continuous Vanguard Circle. During your turn, this unit gets power +5k and critical +1 for each of your opponent's open front row rearguard circles. So against most decks, that's a +10 +2 crit. So you're attacking for 22k with free crits. And if those circles had some units onto them, with combination of the grade 2 we just talked about, Zuiten, then your Vanguard also gets another 10k. But we have Axel. So depending on how many Axel markers they have, this unit gets an additional 5k and an additional crit. So this is insane against Axel, but good enough against Protect and Force. So yeah, that already makes this card pretty good. But then we get a second ability, and that's Act on Vanguard Circle, cost, counter +1, and discard a card from your hand. Remember the grade 2, good Desert Gunner, soul +1, draw another card back. Synergy here, but probably not that good. And what do we get for that cost? Well, and bind all of your opponent's front row rearguards. You may move all your opponent's back row rearguards to a rearguard circle in the same column. So this is basically what I meant about the grade 1 that was terrible, that other cards can do what it does, but better. And this is one of those cards. So for 1 counterblast and 1 discard, you eradicate the entire front row, and while you do that, this unit gets power +5k and an additional crit for each and every of those circles that's now open if you did not move those units from the back row to the front row, and in most cases you're probably not going to do that. But if you had the grade 2 Zuiten onto the field while you did that, and it's an active ability so you can just call them first and then resolve the skill, this unit also gets another 5k for every unit that was bound. And if you have its second Zuiten, then that's plus 10k. And if you had another Gauntlet Buster Dragon onto a rearguard circle, then that one also gains the power. It doesn't get the continuous 5k in crit for open circles, that's a Vanguard ability, but it gains the 5k or 10k or how many Zuiten you have on the field, as Zuiten gives that rearguard Eradicator Gauntlet Buster Dragon power. So insane synergy, and definitely a 5 stars. You could say 6 stars, and you wouldn't be wrong in that sense, but at the same time, this card is very one-dimensional, and if you do not get this one, and you build your deck in this kind of way with all these new cards, you might have an issue. And also, because you discard and you cannot get it back, you might have some issues with defensive plays. And this is where the grade 2 8k Desert Gunner might come into play, but I don't think it's good enough, as it's also you're lacking on aggressive plays early game, and if you need to ride it, that's pretty bad. So you are weak against either very protective decks like Protect that can just perfect guard your Vanguard each and every time, because what do all the crits and power mean if there's always a Sentinel in your face? Because once again, this is a single Vanguard attack and the Sentinel guard restriction comes after. So that's one of the things that I wanted to hint about, why it was stronger if it could do that, but maybe a little bit busted with Gauntlet Buster Dragon. So yeah, I can see why they did it in the way that they remade the skills. To clarify, it's probably not that great against good Protect decks, but also against other Axel decks that can build fields out of nothing. And the ones that can do that right now are Great Nature and the new Gold Paladin. They can build fields out of nothing, so even if they wipe your entire field, they can build back and can do all this stuff again. And also the new Pale Moon with the Silverthorn engine, they can work around this as they can just move everything back to the soul. Sure, you give your opponent all this power and the crits and all this stuff, but don't forget, because you removed everything to the field, they cannot bounce stuff, so you're not minusing, and that means that Zuiten doesn't get power and doesn't give away power. So you can limit your opponent's effectiveness, and if you can manage to block 1 or 2 of these Gauntlet Buster Dragon, then they're probably dead after your onslaught of attacks what Silverthorn can dish out. So yeah, this deck does have some weaknesses, so that's why it's only a 5-star card, and this is probably a very one-dimensional card and will not be seen in 1 or 2 sets down the road for Narukami, as it will just phase out. And that's basically everything for Narukami. As we've seen, the deck got a lot of very nice toys, and of course Gauntlet Buster Dragon and Zuiten and that kind of stuff with Cho-Ou are amazing. These things are amazingly strong and are just insane. But while Standard got a significant power boost, we also got some good toys for Premium, and that's something that I'm very happy about, that Premium got at least something to play with, because after the first set of Narukami, we couldn't actually use anything. Maybe you could use 1 or 2 cards, get some Axel markers and that kind of stuff, but that was about it. Now we actually can use stuff that works on a rearguard circle, that interact with stuff, and we can benefit with things that we have in premium that we cannot benefit from with the standard pool. So yeah, good stuff. But that's basically everything for Narukami. So as we've seen, very interesting in Thunder Dragons and amazing things and a high voltage thunder power with all their new gimmicks and their new Gauntlet Buster Dragon. And I think the name Eradicator was done justice with this support. But now I'm very curious what you guys think of the new cards that Narukami got in the set. So let me know in the comments down below what's your favorite cards or your favorite interaction or skill that they got in this set. What you're very excited about once these cards hit the TCG and what kind of build you want to play. I'm very curious what you guys are going to build, concoct or want to try out. So let me know all that stuff in the comment section down below. As always, I want to thank my supporters over at Patreon for making this video possible. You guys are amazing. If you do want to support the channel, then head over to patreon.com/Vanguard Insider and become a Patreon today. But with that said, I'm Mr. Time Leap, and I see you guys in the next one.